All right, we are now recording, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so we're gonna pick up, as I said, where we left off last time, where we're going to get into the nitty-gritty in terms of your statement of grant purpose, which is the most important component of the application in for the study research Fulbright projects. And as I said before, this is a 2-page essay, so unlike the ETA statement of grant purpose, which is only 1 page, this one is a bit more entailed, and you really do want to think very carefully about how you position yourself with the statement of grant purpose, because this is going to be the thing that essentially convinces the National Screening Committee that your project is worthy of funding. So it has to really convey all of the important elements of the project, most importantly, the who, what, when, where, and why, and how of your research project, and should clearly indicate your commitment to the host country. So where we left off last time, we had just gone over the key questions that you want to think about as you're writing the statement of grant purpose. So I'm going to ask Dr. Habza to advance back to that slide. I believe it's 20, yes, slide 20, thank you very much. And I'm just going to briefly go over what the key questions are, and then we're going to get into some examples. We're going to give you some samples of abstracts. Dr. Habza is going to give you some tips on how to be effective in the writing process. And we also have with us today Carlin Harris, who is one of our former Fulbrighters, and she's going to spend some time talking about her writing process, the things that she found challenging, and the ways in which she overcame those obstacles in order to write a successful proposal. Okay, so key questions. This is number one, very important. With whom do you propose to work? For the study research projects, you absolutely have to have some kind of affiliation with an individual or a lab or a group of researchers at an institution, a university, a nonprofit organization, whatever it is that you're proposing to do, wherever it is you're proposing to do the research. This needs to be established well before you submit the Fulbright application. So if you have not already done so, start thinking about who it is that you want to work with. A good place to start is to reach out to your current faculty mentors, your professors, the people that you're working with in classwork, on research projects, on theses, and get ideas from them. You can then also do some cold emailing. That's perfectly acceptable. You can reach out to people that you've identified as the key figures in leading the research in the particular area that you are going to do your own research. Mentioning that you're applying for a Fulbright is an incredibly important way to get people to pay attention to you. And oftentimes this ends up getting you responses. If you don't get responses right away, don't give up. Keep trying. So that's fundamentally important. Then, of course, you need to tell the readers what you propose to do. And you need to do that in very clear language. You need to avoid any kind of highly technical jargon that is specific to your own field. And you need to explain exactly what it is that you're going to accomplish. You also then need to talk about why it's innovative, why it's important, what will your research contribute to the field. If you're just rehashing what other people have already done, that's not going to convince anybody that your project is worth funding. You then also have to be able to explain specifically how you're going to carry out the research and what you intend to accomplish through the research. So that means your methodology. What kind of sources are you going to be working with? What kind of theory are you applying? What kinds of scientific methods are you using? And what do you hope to accomplish as a result of using those methodologies? Kind of going back to the idea about what is innovative about the research, you also need to think about why it's important or significant. That's the big so what factor, right? How does this matter in our world of incredibly increasing numbers of problems that people face? Why is your research going to make a difference? You also really need to think very carefully about how you are going to contribute to the Fulbright mission of cultural exchange and mutual understanding. So again, this is not like other types of programs where you're just applying in order to accomplish a research project. You are doing it in order to create this cultural bridge between yourself and the host country in which you will be placed. So that needs to be part of the proposal. You can't neglect that. The Fulbright mission obviously is to get people to learn as much about the other culture as possible and to bring aspects of American culture to the host country, to the people you're going to be working with. So what you want to avoid is what we would call parachute research, right? Where you just drop in, do whatever work you need to do to accomplish your specific goals in order to advance to your next level of professional or academic career, and then never talk to anybody. Your research doesn't have any impact on the place in which you're working. So think very carefully about how you're going to interact, what you're going to bring in terms of mutual cultural understanding. And then you want to really explain the timeline, right? You want to make sure that the Fulbright Commission understands that you are absolutely capable of carrying out what you say you're going to carry out within the time frame, right? It's usually about a year. So you need to be able to articulate very clearly the steps in which you're going to accomplish the research, and it has to be convincing that those things can be done in the time frame that you're proposing. Next slide, please. So the next key question is where. Obviously, this is an important component because you have to convince Fulbright that you need to go to the particular place that you want to go, that it's not something you can sit at home in front of your computer and just do internet research, that you actually physically need to be in the location, and why that location is critically important for your research project. Maybe the leading researchers in the area work in the particular institution you want to be affiliated with. Maybe there is a particular type of organism that you're trying to study in an ecosystem that only exists in this particular area. So you have to justify that. And you want to explain to them why you want to undertake this project, right? How does it fit in with your kind of larger goals? What do you intend to accomplish? Why is this the logical next step for you in your academic and professional career? You also want to make sure that you convince the committee that you have the qualifications, right? You've done the requisite coursework. You understand the research methodologies that you intend to use. You've hopefully used them before. You have the experiences and the skills that are necessary to make it successful, right? And that's super important. Again, why does the country that you've chosen have to be the place that you're going to go, right? Why isn't it possible for you to just stay home and do the work here? Why do you particularly have to justify the place when we have amazing institutions, research centers here in the US? Why do you need to leave the US, right? Why is this particular place, again, the leading, most important place for you to do the research? Again, how this will fit in with your further academic and professional development. And when talking about the Fulbright mission again, talking about engaging with others in the community that you're going to be placed in, you need a specific idea for how you will engage with those folks. So you need a civic engagement project. Think about this in terms of your personal interests, right? It's much better and much more convincing to create a civic engagement project that is akin to something that you are already involved in. Try not to be artificial, try not to invent things that you're not actually interested in, and come up with something that is important for you as well as for the community that you're in. A great way to try to narrow down a civic engagement project is to do what we call the 3 things game in a Google search. You put 3 things in, something you're particularly interested in, a personal kind of hobby that you have, and the name of the place that you're going, and see what pops up. And oftentimes you can connect those things and create a civic engagement project that's fitting for that country. Okay, so now we're going to kind of move on to making sure that you address the feasibility of the project. So importantly, you need to think about the context, the place, right? What's going on in the particular country that you're applying for? How will the culture and politics of the host country impact your work, right? You probably don't want to propose a project in Ukraine right now. Not a good idea, right? There's a war going on there. Maybe you want to think about the local politics in the particular area, not even just the whole country, but the specific region or the specific city or the town where you want to go. Do you know that there are the resources there, right, that can help you? Is the lab that you're proposing equipped with the kinds of things that are necessary to do your research? Do you have a strong relationship with somebody who is going to help you conduct the research and give you access to either the people or the materials that you need to do research? So again, this is really important for you to establish that affiliation early on. Do you have the necessary academic and professional background? Do you have language skills? Are you going to be able to waltz in someplace and expect everyone to speak English? Probably not. Not a good idea. Also, very culturally imperialist of you. Don't do that, right? Make sure that you know whether people are capable of engaging in English. And if they're not, do you have the language skills that will give you the ability to engage with the folks in that country? Are you flexible, adaptable, and culturally competent, right? As we like to say in ANSA, whenever you make plans, they will fail, right? Plans never work out. So you always have to have a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. You have to be able to think on your feet. If things don't go the way that you wanted them to go, are you going to be okay? Are you going to be able to adapt? Are you going to be able to handle being in a place where you've probably never lived before, or even if you have, not for an extended period of time? Are you going to be able to adjust culturally to the area, to the folks that you come in contact with? Are you going to be open-minded and tolerant of those that you come into contact with? Those are all things you need to be thinking about. And then you really need to think about your presentation, your project being able to be done in the time you're saying that you are going to do it. And are you very clear about the specific activities that you're going to engage in while you're there? So again, the timeline should be very specific. I'm going to do X during the period between this month and this month. I'm going to do Y during the period between this month and this month. That should be very, very clearly articulated. Okay, so now we're going to give you some examples of some great successful projects that students in the past have proposed. So I'll give you just a minute to read these over. And then what would be really great is to get some feedback. What do you think is strong about these examples? And what do you think is could be strengthened? Anybody have any comments?
Well, you're talking about earlier in the presentation to not use a lot of jargon, and the first half is full of jargon. So someone that's not specialized in this field might have a difficult time following what the proposed research project is.
What do other folks think about that?
Yeah, I wasn't really expecting portrait photography to be the main focus of the abstract, so it came a little bit out of nowhere for me. So having it like a little earlier emphasized as the focus of the abstract might be helpful.
Okay. What else? Dr. Hamza, Dr. Bhattacharya, do you have any comments?
I think one thing that I think this abstract does really well is kind of in the middle of the abstract where it says a successful project will determine if aluminum has an anticipatory effect on neuronal transport of APP. So we get a sense of like what kind of outcomes they're looking for or how they'll know whether their project was successful, which I think is really important.
I'm a bit confused myself about why the person wants to pair portraits with beautiful arrays of neurons. It makes no sense in terms of the research project, sort of researching aluminum exposure on these proteins. And it doesn't, yeah, normally we don't sort of have neuron portraits.
Okay, so we've identified some problems. Any strengths that you see in this?
I think it's also important, like we talked about how you want to tie back what your Fulbright project will do for your future career. And I think they summed that up really well at the end. So they clearly have kind of a vision for their career and maybe why this will contribute to that. But yeah, I agree with the other comments about the kind of drawbacks is the project doesn't seem extremely clear.
Well, I think it's really interesting because this was a successful proposal. I will say with regard to the comment about jargon, it's true that they do use some jargon, but they immediately then explain what that term means. So obviously in certain cases, you're going to have to use terminology that's specific, especially in this kind of field, right? But you'll notice that they say, yes, they use this jargon of aluminum exposure on neuronal transport of amyloid precursor protein, which I'm like, what? Right. But then they say a protein that can be spliced into amyloid beta, a key hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. Okay, like so now I know this is a super important piece of the puzzle that we need to better understand in this disease, right? So yeah, and I also think the photography thing is super interesting, right? Maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense to us, but obviously somebody found it to be pretty interesting. All right, let's move on to the next one. So let's take a moment just to read these over. What do we think about this one?
For me, I feel like it's very comprehensive in terms of the work that they're going to do, and it's targeting very specific populations and locations and how it'll support the country. It is missing the tie between the host country and the home country, and it's missing how it'll also support their future work.
Anything else? So one thing I should say is in the previous example, the photography was the community engagement component. So even though we didn't necessarily see how it connected as well to the research, it was a good example of how the individual would create community engagement. So in this particular project, there isn't really an explanation of that, but I should say that in the abstract portion of the Fulbright application, there's a separate abstract for community engagement. And so this person chose not to mention it here. They probably elaborated on it further in that particular abstract. So there's 3 abstracts that you do in the Fulbright application. And any other comments? Okay,
think it's
let's,
important.
sorry.
Go
ahead,
I was just
Karen.
gonna say, I think it's important that they acknowledge the novelty of the project. I think a lot of times research gets repeated, and at least in the abstract, they kind of make it clear like this is the first of its kind study. So it kind of caught my attention, and I think it would catch the attention of the reviewer as well.
Mhm. Yeah, this is a really good example of something that's not parachute research, right? They really indicate the ways in which this is going to be of benefit. It's an important project, but it's also going to be important to the local population.
I think on the writing level too, there's really good use of signposting here. So these sentences begin with very clear, like we know what the sentence is going to be about. I will work with so-and-so. I will create effective public health outreach programs. And what's another good example? As a nationwide statistical survey, like it really gives us that most important information up front, which is so important when we're writing something as tightly as an abstract, because we have to pack a lot of information into a very little amount of space.
I think going back to Susan's initial comment that this doesn't necessarily connect to the person's future goals, and the whole, like the US, I was thinking that this writer might have missed an opportunity in identifying how and why it would be useful to see what is going on with Roma populations in reference to domestic populations here, who are sometimes transient and difficult to track and just monitor because of their social living conditions. This is a problem that is actually an international problem. How do we deal with people who are not on the grid in many cases? So I was just sort of thinking, a nice sentence at the end that really would have opened up why and how this is a crucial question, not just for Roma people in Hungary, but everyone would have really hit this home.
Yes, great point. Although again, I do want to just point out that there is the third abstract is about how this connects to your long-term goals. So maybe the person chose to do that there, but definitely something that should be touched on somewhere. So thank you very much for that. Okay, let's go to the last one real quick. So what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I think you can definitely tell this is a doctoral student. I think it's very well written. It says like right away what the goal of the project is, like, or what the research project is, and then who they will work with, what is the ultimate purpose of the project is extremely clear, how they're going to do it. They give some background, which could have like a little bit different organization, but the background is there. And then why this project is novel, which like all kind of immediately tells me, okay, like this is an important project that needs to be done. And they laid it out extremely clearly how they're going to do it.
For those of you who are not at the doctoral level, don't worry. The Fulbright committee does not compare you against people who are in different levels. So you'll be compared to folks at the same, cohort, the same level. So don't worry about that. Any other comments about what this does well, what this doesn't do well?
I'm always critical of things that I couldn't come up with myself, but I acknowledge that persons conducting interviews. Why do these need to be conducted on site in Ecuador? I don't know. And also, what's the scale of the interviews of the project that this person wants to do? They were just saying like they're 1/3 of the population or 70% sort of urban. Like, how are they limiting or how are they going to actually define the population that they're looking at? People either live in rural places or in urban places. So the fact that they're doing both really tells me nothing at all.
Okay, thanks so much. Any last comments before I turn it over to our writing expert, Dr. Habza?
I thought one thing. Oh, sorry. Hello. One thing I thought, just sort of my field is international, Indigenous education. So the first thing I'm seeing here is working with rural people, a lot of whom might be Indigenous, and a lot of consideration, I think, needs to come into how you're working in Indigenous communities, particularly when research has often been very detrimental, frankly, to a lot of communities, or how, as we're learning a lot in our classes, it takes a while to build a lot of trust, just to even get your foot in the door. So I would maybe suggest to the student, like, make sure you've got people on the ground, whoever you're trying to coordinate with, who already have a strong presence in the community, because otherwise you can get frozen out. Or if they do speak, you might not get really accurate information because people are not comfortable sharing, either because you're a foreigner or you're the wrong, sex, if men don't talk to women or things like that, or just from previous experience with researchers that kind of come and go and take cultural knowledge and stuff. So that's all.
Yes, fantastic point. Thank you so much for that. All right, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit and turn it over to Dr. Habza, who's going to talk to us about productive writing.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Staub. All right, so how many of us like writing? Show of hands. Are there any of us who gets up in the morning or just like, I cannot wait to start doing some academic writing today? All right, I see one hand. You'll notice I did not raise my own hand, right? I have studied writing. I work with writers a lot, but writing is difficult and it's hard and it's really challenging, right? And so to get you started, I think we're going to provide some tips today so that to help you better organize your writing sessions so that you're not just staring at a blank screen or a blank page and being like, where the heck do I get going, right? Like, look at this person who's like in misery here on this slide. We don't want you to be that person. Instead, we want you to be able to move forward productively. I don't have a magic wand, right? We have to do the writing no matter what. But hopefully some of the tips that I provide are going to be a balm that can heal your ailments as you write today. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to use some of these tools and methods to make your writing sessions more productive. And so how we're going to think about writing is that, the words on the page are the outcome of what you're doing, but it takes a lot of work to get there, right? You have to think about what you're going to write. You have to talk with someone else about it. You have to conduct research. So writing isn't just the outcome, the product, but it also includes a process. And that process includes brainstorming, revising, editing, proofreading, and drafting. And that those processes, those stages are going to be often reciprocal. They're not going to, not reciprocal. They're going to be cyclical. I used the wrong word and I apologize. And so you'll move between the stages over and over again. So sometimes you'll start drafting and then you'll start revising what you drafted. Then you have to go back and draft something else that's new, revise that. You may do some editing. You may do some other revisions. And so you won't move through those stages linearly. So when you're sitting down thinking about what am I going to do today, it's really important that you set some appropriate goals. And you want to think about where you are in those stages of the writing process. So what might not be too helpful is to be like, all right, I have 3 hours today. I'm just going to write my introduction. And then you open a computer or you open your notebook and then you just kind of sit there and go, how do I even get started on this? What do I want to do? Instead of just ambiguously aiming to write an introduction, you can break it up into smaller parts and having specific measurable goals. So for example, write 2 to 3 sentences explaining the background of the central problem to a layperson for 30 minutes. And so that gives you a specific goal. It has a specific outcome and a specific time frame. So after 30 minutes, you'll know whether you've met your outcome or not. And maybe you need to take 15 more minutes. Maybe you need to come back to it after working on something else, or maybe you finished it early. But that way, you know what you're doing, you know what you set out to do, and you know whether you completed the task. Some other examples could include collecting key statistics that I include in the introduction, 20 minutes. So that example exemplifies how research is part of the writing process. It's not just putting things down on paper, but you have to do preparation work in order to get writing too. Or write 3 to 4 sentences describing what has been tried to solve the problem for 30 minutes. And so drafting oftentimes is just getting something down on paper so you can have a conversation about it later with someone too. So other goals can be make an appointment with an advisor, get some writing feedback from my own faculty advisor. And so you want to think about the writing process holistically and how you set those goals so that you're able to achieve what you want to achieve and get the most out of a writing session, rather than just staring in frustration at the document that you're working on. Right, so this chart is going to outline what some of the appropriate tasks are for each stage of the writing process. So during the brainstorming stage, this is when you're going to, conduct research, read over important texts and articles in your field, do some note taking. You can answer brainstorming prompts that are included on our Canvas course, and you can start drawing connections between different ideas. Also, having a meeting with an advisor can be really good for brainstorming and making those connections too. Once you get the brainstorming process done, then you can transition into drafting, getting all those ideas that you have out in the air onto paper. And you can do that by starting with creating an outline, composing some new content, or adding new content to an existing draft. So again, these are cyclical stages. So sometimes you draft and revise at the same time. Once you have something drafted, then you're ready to start revising it. So we never want to turn in a first draft as our final draft. That's the only time I say that there's something wrong with the first draft, is when we're treating it as a final draft. That's the only time we apologize for a first draft. So you have to revise that first draft. So make major changes to it, such as rearranging the sentences or paragraphs, changing the focal point of a new paragraph, or trimming down content in a paragraph, or adding new details to that paragraph. So there's a lot of organizational work that happens in revision. And we're thinking about revision as major changes, as opposed to editing, which is spell checking, editing the punctuation, changing word choices, and formatting the document. So I like to think of revision and editing as the difference between redecorating and home renovations, right? So if I am building a house and I'm renovating my house and I want a new closet, I'm not going to paint my bathroom, put up new tile, and then knock out the wall and build a closet, right? That's a waste of my time and resources. Same thing with writing. You shouldn't start nicely editing something and then delete the paragraph a day later because you don't need it, right? You always want to make sure that your revisions are done before you move into the editing stages. And so editing is really the final polishing, whereas revision is the substantial changes to the content and to the organization of the document. Another element to be aware of when thinking about how to be a more productive writer is that emotions play a large part in this, right? Research has shown that many times procrastination is not because we're lazy, but because we have a fear of failure, that we want it to be perfect the first time that we do it. Another way that we get attached to first drafts is we want it to be perfect. We spend a lot of time perfecting that first draft, and then someone comes along and tells us this isn't really meeting the goals of what this needs to be done, and we feel disappointed in what we have produced. But that's actually all part of the process, right? And so being aware of these emotions, of wanting to be perfect, of having an anxiety when we're confronting a big, scary task, it can actually inhibit motivation and inhibit our ability to write. And so it's really good to recognize that, process it, write about it, reflect on it, and think about how you can move forward so that you aren't being caught up in procrastination. And one thing that the Archbishop Desmond Tutu has said is the only way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And that's another important part of the writing process, is that we have to take the time to commit to the process, and that it's one step at a time. You're not going to get it all done in the first draft. You're not going to get it all done in the second draft. And so be patient with yourself, and don't put the expectation on yourself that it's going to be perfect. We don't have that expectation for you as a writer. And so when you're coming to work with us, we know that it's in revision stages. I often tell writers, don't apologize for what you're bringing in today, because what we're doing is we're working with the raw material that you are creating. And as an act of creation, it takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, not just with the process, but with you yourself as the writer. All right. So this handy little chart breaks down the writing process. So I'm sure that we can, we're very familiar with some of the ways in which we avoid writing. So little time spent with actual writing and so much other time spent with other parts of completing a document. I know I particularly spend a lot of time shouting at my own computer, especially when I get frustrated with the technology. All right, so that's it for thinking about the writing process and how to create more productive sessions. So keep in mind that you want to set those specific measurable goals, and we can go ahead and transition into the additional resources that we have at the office. Some of the resources that we have are on the ONSA website. So you can make appointments. We have a YouTube channel that will include videos to presentations such as the one that you're attending right now. And we also have a Slack. So on the front page, you can get access to our Slack channel for students. And some of the questions that you pose in the Slack can be answered much more quickly than sending someone an email sometimes. So it's a really quick way to get access to one of the advisors in our office. There is also the ASU Fulbright site, fulbright.asu.edu, and that contains, frequently asked questions, some videos, and the timeline for the application process. And then additionally, the Fulbright US student site, which has the award search tools, the country profiles, the data, and this is the information you should be referring to over and over and over again as you're completing your application, particularly the country profile. All right, so your next step, if you haven't made an intake meeting already, please go ahead and make one if you are committed to applying to a Fulbright Study Research Grant. You want to select your award type. So we have award types for research and arts, graduate degree, English teaching assistant. If you're not sure about which one you want to apply to, just pick one of those intake appointments, see if that's what you want to do, and you can take an intake appointment for another award as well until you figure out which award you would like to apply to. And you can make those appointments at onsa.asu.edu. Great. But before we conclude today, because we still have 15 minutes, I'd like us to have some conversations with our guest today, Carlin, who is a Fulbright grantee. So Carlin, do you mind talking a little bit more about the revision process and the writing process with your application? What did that look like for you?
Yes, I definitely resonate with a lot of the frustration that you mentioned. And honestly, I'm writing a journal article right now. And so the refresher on how to break up small goals is actually very helpful. But I leaned on the ONSA a lot in my revision process. When I was working with Dr. Kyle Mox at the time, and I would send him a draft like every couple of weeks. I probably had a good, maybe like in full draft form, maybe 5 or 6 like different iterations of a full draft. So again, like was mentioned, that your first draft is not your final draft. I found the thing I really had to let go of, especially like as a pre-med student, is like the perfectionism of what I write the first time has to be what I'm going to submit. But that really contributed a lot to my writer's block. And so when I was able to get just, even if it's gibberish, even if it doesn't make any sense, even like if at first it sounds like crap, and it probably will, to get your ideas on a page and look at it and be able to organize your thoughts after the fact is so much easier having it jumbled in your head, which I learned quickly. I thought I had to really think about what I was going to write and then write it, as opposed to getting all my thoughts down on paper and organizing it afterwards, and then having someone else look at it, someone at ONSA or another faculty member. And like between that iteration process between you, someone else, or more multiple people, eventually it will come together. It just takes a little bit of patience, which is why I think it's been encouraged multiple times to start as early as you can. So you're not kind of at the deadline stressing out with all of these iterations. But yeah, my biggest advice is just write, just even if it's crap. Just got to get something on paper.
Definitely, definitely. You know, something that I always tell applicants when we're working on first drafts for the first time is I like to think of the first draft as the offering we make to the writing gods in order to have a conversation about what the actual essay should look like, right? It is a sacrifice that we make, but we can't actually talk about it until we have something on paper. Otherwise, we are just trading in hypotheticals until we actually start writing something on paper. So tell me a little bit more about how you worked on specific areas such as the abstract. So we looked at the abstract today. How did you approach writing that?
Yeah, from what I remember, I kept the abstract until the very end of the process when I had my statement of grant purpose done, when I had written out kind of what my community engagement project would be. And then from that, like, I think I used like a Word document. And again, the first draft of the abstract is gonna not be good, but I took some of like the most important sentences I thought really reflected what I was going to be doing, and pasted them into another document. And I think some of the guiding questions that Dr. Stoff showed at the beginning are really helpful to guide what the abstract should look like, just in kind of a summarized way. But again, it's a lot of like piecing things together. And that's where my faculty mentors really came in helpful, because they've done this their whole careers. They have written abstracts multiple times, and they can help tell you what's important, what's not, what's too much detail, and what will get your point across in like a 2-minute glance when they're reviewing your proposal.
Thank you. Did you feel that the abstract represented kind of like the refinement of thinking of your project? Like, could you have written that abstract before you started writing the application?
No, definitely not. I would needed the whole, like that whole process of like editing, revising, getting the statement of grant purpose down. It also helps you realize like what maybe some of the pitfalls of your project might be at the beginning, and kind of working with your faculty to revise some of the methods that way. But yeah, I feel like I needed to have my personal statement and my statement of grant purpose, like not complete, but at least all of the ideas there before the abstract was written, of what I wanted to tell the reviewers at the end.
Great. All right. Thank you, Carlin. So, you know, I hope that Carlin's answers help illustrate how this is an intensive process that takes work and investment, right? But that work and investment can really pay off. So all of you have like a live Fulbright grantee in the chat with us today. So go ahead and ask your questions. What would you all like to know more about the Fulbright application?
I missed the part 1 of this, so I apologize, or maybe this is not even applicable particularly to this set of meetings. So this summer, I'm going to be in West Kalimantan, Indonesia, doing internship for my global health graduate program. And so my Fulbright scholarship grant proposal will be research in that particular area. And so the organization I'm going to be working with, I had hoped to work with them about developing a research project that would be about these rainforest community, organic farming in these rainforest communities. But when I was reviewing some more information and that was being sent out through this program, it was saying to focus on a university or government organization. And I just wanted some clarity, because Dr. Stoff, you did mention about a nonprofit organization earlier in this program meeting, and they are a nonprofit organization. So if someone could provide clarity for me, I would appreciate that.
I think it is more traditional for people to have affiliations with universities or research centers, but it is certainly not out of the range of possibility. So I certainly don't think that you would have a problem with that. It is a little bit less traditional. I would see if perhaps there is a way you can get a connection through the nonprofit with a local institution. To get a letter of affiliation from an institution does carry a lot of weight, which is not to say that something from a nonprofit wouldn't. but it does show that there's this established institution there that is, especially when you're doing research, focused on that and gives it a little bit more heft. But I wouldn't discourage you from doing the project that you're describing.
And I would say it's also advantageous to try to create connections with scholars who are working on your topic in your area. So you can cultivate your networks of exchange, but also just know about sources that most of us in the US don't ever actually find out about. And one of the advantages, of course, to Fulbright is that you're able to broaden your perspectives and sort of take account of research that's being produced elsewhere.
And I'll just add to that, that you can have up to 3 affiliation letters with 3 different affiliates. So if you wanted to work with the community and also work with a scholar, that is something that you can secure. And I would just stress to look at the country summary, because some of them will say you have to work with a university, and other countries are a little more flexible with who can be an affiliate. So that would be, I think, your safety net there. Would check there first.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think their page did not disclude, but they specifically talked about governmental organizations and universities. And then I did a backwards search too on the Fulbright scholars of previous winners. And yeah, there wasn't a lot of universities in Indonesia, particularly in that, or I should say in that area, that actually produced winners that came to the United States or other countries or vice versa that I could find easily. But I will continue to look for people in the field though. Thank you.
All right, what other questions do we have today?
So Dr. Hobbs, I think you made a really good point that things are so country specific that it is super important for you to examine very carefully the specifics of the place that you're proposing to go, because they will differ vastly from country to country. So I just pulled up Indonesia to see what they have to say. And one of the things that they want is candidates must have plans to jointly publish with their Indonesian counterparts the result of their research at accredited journal publications. So having an academic affiliation will greatly enhance your ability to accomplish that, but it's not 100% necessary, right? There are lots of people who work in the nonprofit world who also publish in scholarly journals. So my advice would be is to connect with those people, read the literature out there, see who's publishing what, and it may be that you find somebody who is affiliated with an institution that also has links with the nonprofit, and that can maybe bridge that gap for you. So the other thing that we want to remind you here at ANSA is to use your summer, right? We're all going to break in a couple of weeks and go off and do our various and assorted lovely adventurous things like go to Indonesia. But we do not want you to lose the time that you have over the summer to draft. And we here at ANSA, well, some of us at ANSA will be available to help you over the summer. Dr. Habsa will be around, Dr. Mox will be around, Dr. Bhattacharya and I are faculty, and they don't pay us over the summer, so we don't work over the summer. But we will be back on call starting August 1st, but also available over email. And you should be corresponding with us. You should be working on drafts. You should not lose the time that you have over the summer because the deadline for internal submission for us at ASU is September 12th, right? So we start school back, like August 16th or 17th. That gives you less than a month, right? So you absolutely do not want to lose that time over the summer.
And remember, you can work on it a little bit each day by setting specific measurable goals. So that way it doesn't feel like this big ambiguous task that you have to take on. All right, do we have any final questions, comments, concerns for today?
just going to pop my email in the chat here. If Dr. Bhattacharya and Dr. Habza can do the same, that way if students have any questions, they can reach out to us. You can also just sign up for an appointment with one of us through the link that Dr. Habza shared earlier. We hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your Friday. And oh, Carlin, thank you very much. So if you want to reach out to Carlin, a great resource, really somebody who's been through the experience, who knows what the obstacles are, the challenges, and how to overcome them successfully, is somebody who's been on a Fulbright. So feel free to reach out to Carlin as well.
We do have one question in the chat before we go. So it's from Amani. Do we have any suggestions for securing an alternate potential host if the first hasn't responded yet?
So our advice always is to start with folks that you know, right? People that maybe you've been working with here at ASU, try to get names of folks that you can connect with that way. If that comes up without any positive results, I would definitely give the person another little nudge, right? It's totally okay to do that. Academics, if it's a person at an academic institution, they tend to be quite busy, especially at this time of the year. Don't take their silence as a complete lack of interest. It may just be that that email has gone to the bottom of the list and they're making their way through. So you're more, I would give them, how long has it been since you contacted the person?
Sorry, hello, that was actually, it was, well, I was gonna apply last fall, so I started it last fall. I didn't follow up yet, but I guess I'd sent it in maybe September or the end, like beginning of the school year, and I figured, okay, things are busy, you know, it wasn't a sweat, but then I didn't hear by like, I guess it had been a month or two, and then I was like, okay, I'll leave it alone. I ended up not applying at the time, so I guess, sorry, maybe it was spring, but I gave it maybe a month and a half too, and then I didn't hear back anything. But I think what I'm more worried about is I know time is of the essence. So in terms of requesting letters and stuff, I need to have the right host, but I don't want to put it out, you know, like, you know, resume or something to a bunch of places and then get caught. I'm not sure the protocol, I guess. Like, I mean, don't want to harass them, but I need time sensitive.
It's perfectly acceptable to send a follow-up email and say, you know, hi, I reached out to you before, but, you know, perhaps you were busy. I'd just like to bring this up again. Again, mention Fulbright. Like, that's kind of important to say, like, I'm applying for Fulbright. But then if you don't hear again, you know, for a month, then I would say that person is probably not going to be the person. So in the meantime, be working through the networks that you already have here, asking people, and then try to be identifying other folks. And yes, you can reach out with a cold email. It might take 5 different people and then you get 1 or 2, you know, but don't give up. That's our advice. Don't give up.
I'd also, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dr. Bhattacharya.
Oh, I was just about to say, this is probably obvious, but try to contact people who are more senior, because people who are junior or sort of contingent sort of faculty members might not have the resources, time, or energy, or even space to host you. That's all.
Thank you.
And I would just add on that having a couple of drafts of the SGP already under your belt, having a more finite, refined idea of what you're doing can help you explain that to them too, in that initial outreach as well. So I think make sure that progress is being made on the application before talking to them, because that way then you have a better idea of how to talk with them about what you're trying to do.
Definitely, thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned the reaching out to our network, because I already secured letters of recommendation or people who would do it, but I didn't actually ask them, like, do you have contacts, you know, in some other place? So I think I'll go back and do that. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. Well, I think we're done for today. So it was great seeing all of you. We're going to let you all go. We know how busy you all are at the end of the semester. So it was nice meeting with all of you today. And we hope to see you in our offices working on a Fulbright application soon, if you're not already meeting with us.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend. Thanks.
Carla, bye.